The Texans get a 32-12 wild card playoff win. They were home dogs in that game, and they absolutely crushed the pathetic Chargers. Someone named Eric Murray, we're not sure who that is, but if you saw the game, he returned one of those interceptions to the house. Pick six for the defense in Houston. C.J. Stroud had a bunch of mistakes himself, but he did throw a touchdown pass, and Houston ends up getting the win. In Baltimore, Lamar Jackson threw 2 touchdown passes, did not have overly impressive stats, but the performance led by Derrick Henry, who scored not 1 but 2 of the touchdowns there in Baltimore, running the ball right down the throat of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who used to have a good defense. Not anymore. They suck on defense, and so they get the win. Henry and Jackson combining to outrush Pittsburgh all night. Baltimore outrushed the Steelers 299 yards to 29. Now, I didn't play in the NFL. I just do an overnight show. That seems like a lot. 299 to 29 rushing yards in that game. In fact, it was the most rushing yards allowed by Pittsburgh in a playoff game all time. All time. And so the previous record was 51 years ago by the old Oakland Raiders, who put up 232 yards for what it's worth. But the better story in both of these games is in the losing locker room. So that is where we will begin. We'll start out with the Yinzers. And I want to focus in on the quarterback, Russell Wilson, Mr. Limited. Russell Wilson, who said in the moments after the game that he hoped to be a Pittsburgh Steeler going forward. How is his future looking? So I've got National Weather Service, aerial attack, and cosplay. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to pour bleach all over the Steeler locker room because there's a lot of viruses in that locker room right now. Woo! What a mess. What a mess. But to answer the question on the table, Russell Wilson saying he hoped to be a Pittsburgh Steeler for a long time. How is his future looking? All right, so if you when you look ahead, right, you got to look back before you look ahead. So we're going to look back. Russell Wilson had the stage to himself. He had the opportunity to prove that the narrative around Russell Wilson was bogus, right? That this was a chance to show all the haters, all the doubters that they were wrong, and he was legit, right? Show the world he could still step up. He still had it in his bones to step up against a good opponent on the road in the playoffs. And he went out there. Now, if you're a box score reader, you're like, oh, he played really well. You know, it's not his fault the Steelers lost the game. You can't blame Russell Wilson. I've already seen that commentary in the hours and the day or day or two since that game that you can't blame Russell Wilson. So the box score readers who didn't watch the game are like, it's not his fault. For those that know ball, the ones that really know ball, you say, of course, he coughed up a hairball. He coughed it up. Dreadful first half. Didn't do a damn thing. Pittsburgh down 21-0 at halftime. And Russell Wilson is not the answer. He is not the answer. In fact, the National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning for Russ, and it's trying to inform the public here. For those of you that are still delusional when it comes to Russell Wilson, the National Weather Service trying to inform you that the conditions are ideal for bad football. It is a combustible situation with Russ and really the rapid spread of crap bag football with Russell Wilson as your quarterback. And it's fair to say the quarterback who starts in Pittsburgh is not on the roster, the quarterback next year who starts, because as bad as Russell Wilson was, Justin Fields is not the answer because Mike Tomlin's going to continue on as the coach in Pittsburgh, and he has no confidence in Justin Fields. How do I know that? Because it would have been easy to take Russell Wilson out of the game and give Justin Fields all the snaps in the second half of the game, and he didn't do that because he thinks that Justin Fields sucks also. Otherwise, you would have put Fields out there and allowed him to play. It's the only way to interpret that. Now, meanwhile, wide receiver George Pickens, he says that he had seen growth in the offense since he got to the Steelers a couple years back, but he admits, well, rather let me tell you what he missed. Let's go to the audio tape. Here is George Pickens. Listen closely as he has a back and forth with the media. Take a listen.
George, you've been with this offense now for 3 years. Have you seen signs of growth, and how much more does this team still need to grow offensively?
Yeah, I've seen signs of growth for sure. From past, the first year I've been here, just way more growth for sure.
George, does that make you optimistic going forward?
Nah.
Not optimistic. Not optimistic. Well, I've seen growth. I'm just not optimistic. All right, so how do you interpret the comments from George Pickens? How do you interpret the comments from George Pickens? So Pickens spoke unfiltered. All right, now there are those Steeler apologists that think that, he didn't mean what he said. I think he meant exactly what he said. He sounded like he stopped and listened to what the reporter said. He said, nah, because he knows that the Pittsburgh offense is a food ration offense. All right, that is the Marcel in Brooklyn offense. That is the oodles and noodles. That is the frozen pizza. That's what that is, right? And they're not close to being good. If you look at the gap between where the Steelers' offense is with the incompetent Russell Wilson and the even more incompetent Justin Fields compared to teams like Baltimore, it is the size of the Grand Canyon, the gap. All right, it is a giant ravine is what it is. Now, turning the page. Speaking of Pittsburgh, linebacker Patrick Queen, a former Raven, Patrick Queen said the Steelers' defense got, quote, too comfortable, is what he said. They got too comfortable during the season. So how do you interpret this? He claimed that's why they lost. They got too comfortable. The defense was terrible the last 5 games of the year. So my response to that is aerial attack is my response. Ergo, passing the buck. The old passing offense, no attention to detail, players not held accountable. They failed to do the basics. All of those things, right? All of those things. If you talk about attention to detail, you got too comfortable. That's attention to detail. Poor technique. Yeah, the tackling was biblically bad for Pittsburgh. Now, I don't watch every second of every Steelers game. I can just tell you what I watched and what I witnessed on the game over the weekend. And what I saw were players who just were not – they were in position, but they were unable to make plays. So the running back, Derrick Henry, for Baltimore was running there. And sometimes he wouldn't be touched until he got past the line. But even when he was, it was like a pinball bouncing off the side, and the defenders were bouncing off Derrick Henry. It was ridiculous. And Patrick Queen, who I thought was a good player in Baltimore, and maybe he was a good player in Baltimore, but watching him play just in that game on Saturday, it's one of these guys. He looks like Adonis, right? He looks like Adonis, but he plays like Athenia when he's out there. It's fascinating. He was a traffic cone in this game. There was one play in particular which has gone viral where Queen was in position to make a tackle and took the worst possible route to make the tackle. Like, he did not want to make the tackle. He was trying not to make the tackle. I don't know what was going on there. But big picture for Mike Tomlin, the standard is the standard. And the standard was met. The standard is to make the playoffs, have a winning record, get to the playoffs. And so they met the standard. They made the playoffs. They lost on Wild Card Weekend. And on a 6-game postseason skid now, the Yinzers. Last time the Steelers won a playoff game, Barack Obama was the president. Okay, it's been a minute since the last time the Steelers won a playoff game, bringing new meaning to the terrible towel. Because, man, are they terrible in these playoff games. Oi and double oi. That's an outdated reference, but look it up. All right, final thought. So we pivot away from that. We go to the other side of the Saturday playoff card. What do you make of Jim Harbaugh's maiden voyage as coach of the Chargers in the playoffs? Playoffs? So this was supposed to be different. The reason you bring Jim Harbaugh in is because you're good enough to be a playoff team, but you're not good enough to make any noise in the playoffs. So you bring Harbaugh in to fix that. And he talked a good game. He gave us goofy sound bites. He did all of that. The blueprint, supposedly it changed, that Harbaugh was a no-nonsense guy, that he was going to get it done, and he was his advertiser. He brought in the grit. These were not your soft powder blue Chargers anymore. No, they had grit, mental toughness, All those big phrases, right? Detailed approach, all that. And what the Chargers got in the first playoff game under Jim Harbaugh was cosplay. They got cosplay. That Harbaugh was dressed up. Might as well have had Anthony Lynn out there or Brandon Staley, because that's the Chargers I remember under Anthony Lynn and Brandon Staley. Not a damn thing had changed, right? And Charger fans, as the great Brian Wheeler used to say on his radio broadcast, were mystified, mesmerized, and mortified watching the Chargers play in that game. Mistake-filled, sloppy, unprofessional, all of that. Now, how about the quarterback? How about the Chargers quarterback? So let's get to the word association game. Word association game. Say the first word that comes to mind when you think of Justin Herbert's performance against the Texans in the wild card game over the weekend. So the word I came up with is Kirsch, as in Kershaw, Clayton Kershaw. Much like Clayton Kershaw, Justin Herbert celebrated universally by NFL media. Chargers play 2 to 3, if not more, primetime games every year. And during the NFL season, Chris Collinsworth, Troy Aikman, Herbie take turns giving Justin Herbert a Manny and a Petty. The national NFL broadcasters can not get enough of Justin Herbert. And yet, we have seen here, despite all the shoulder rubs and the bubble bass and the toe licking and all that, in opportunities to step up in the playoffs, Justin Herbert is lacking that je ne sais quoi. He just doesn't have it, right? Herbert, as impressive Hall of Fame start to his career for the regular season, and he crumbles in big games. He crumbles. He's had 2 playoff games. Blew a 27-0 lead to Jacksonville, lost 31-30 in that game, and he had a 75.3 passer rating in the second half of that game. Only had 1 touchdown the entire game. The reason the Chargers were up big in that playoff game in Jacksonville was because of mistakes by the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence had 4 interceptions in that game, and they still won. And now Herbert throws 4 interceptions and has a passer rating of 40.9 against a Texans team that was so bad, thought of so little by football people and by the gambling community, that they were actually a home dog. And Herbert went out there and he rode the vomit comet, and really more of a kamikaze mission. The Texans tried to give the Chargers the game in the first quarter. I was texting a buddy of mine who does radio stuff back east, and we were going back and forth. I was like, this is unbelievable. The Chargers should be up like 17-0 at this point. It's a 6-0 game. And sure enough, as the game progressed, Herbert kept making mistakes. And even though the Texans were making mistakes, it didn't matter. The Chargers made bigger mistakes, and they end up losing the game.